They say that death and taxes are the only two things that are certain in life, but I reckon that being disappointed by game studios because they cancel a title that you're really looking forward to could be a contender for a third spot. As with any industry, video game companies are always going to have projects that fall through, and often this will be because of budgetary constraints, studio restructuring, or just a general lack of perceived interest in a particular title. Every so often, though, a game will be cancelled, and when the reason for it comes to light, we're somewhat taken aback. For this list, we're taking a look at some of the most insane justifications we've ever heard for video games getting the chop. Just as a side note, we won't be looking at Silent Hills today, as although the breakup of Kojima and Konami was messy, we've talked about it till the cows have come home. No, seriously, the office is full of cattle. Please send help. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 video games cancelled for ridiculous reasons. Number 10. Among Us 2. Unless you've been living completely off the grid for the past few years, then you'll no doubt have heard of Among Us. The game was originally released in 2018, though it didn't start receiving much in the way of hype until You Know What hit. The premise is simple. Players convene on a spaceship and must complete a number of tasks to ensure the ship's smooth operation. But plot twist, at least one of them is an imposter and is going around killing the others and sabotaging the ship. The popularity of Among Us led developer Inner Sloth to announce in August 2020 that a sequel was in the works. However, just a month after the announcement, Inner Sloth revealed that plans for Among Us 2 had been scrapped because fans were enjoying Among Us so much, and that instead, the team would continue to focus on adding new content to the original game instead. A number of assets and animations had already been developed, but rather than ditching them, Inner Sloth rolled them into Among Us and assured fans that it remained dedicated to improving the first title. With new content being added all the time, it doesn't seem like the Among Us train is set to slow down anytime soon. Number 9. Castlevania Resurrection. Oh, Dreamcast. Such a tragic tale. You had so many things going for you. You could have been great, but it seems like the whole world conspired against you, and now you'll forever be remembered as the machine that forced Sega out of the console game. Despite the Dreamcast being a decent bit of kit, there were a number of reasons why it was a commercial failure. Its marketing was poor in comparison to other console manufacturers, the PS2 was looming on the horizon, boasting all of the features of the Dreamcast and more, and studios just didn't have any faith in it. One such studio was Konami, who began developing Castlevania Resurrection for a March 2000 release. The game would have centered on Sonia Belmont, as she and Victor Belmont traveled back in time to face off against Dracula. It was revealed at E3 1999, and based on its demo, didn't look half bad. Unfortunately for fans, Konami ended up cancelling Castlevania Resurrection because they didn't think that the Dreamcast would sell very well. They weren't wrong, of course, but had they seen the game through, it might have become one of the best reasons to own a Dreamcast. Alas, we shall never know. Number 8. Animal Wars. The story of Lair's development is a tragic one. From publisher interference to poor working relationships between the devs, if it could go wrong, it did. Even after 3 years and $25 million, the game released to a dismal reception from critics, earning itself an average of just 53 out of 100 on Metacritic. Sadly, Lair wasn't the only victim of this sorry saga. Developer Factor 5, the studio behind Lair, had also pitched Animal Wars to Sony, with the idea being that it would be a brand new IP for the PlayStation 3. Had it ever seen the light of day, Animal Wars would have been a World War II-inspired turn-based tactical shooter set in the midst of a war between two anthropomorphic animal factions. The premise sounded great, and what bits of artwork we saw looked great, so it's a massive shame that Sony pulled the plug. The reason for Animal Wars cancellation ultimately came down to money. Because Lair was having a rough old time of it, Sony needed to funnel more cash into the project, but rather than digging down into the back of the sofa, they decided instead to bin off Animal Wars. It was basically like scrapping your Porsche so you could put its windscreen wipers on your Vauxhall Nova. Number 7. Super Mario Spikers. If there's one thing you can say about the Super Mario franchise, it's that it can always be counted upon to deliver the family-friendly fun. Things might have been different though if Next Level Games had been able to plow ahead with their vision for Super Mario Spikers. The game was set to be released on the Nintendo Wii and would have featured Mario and pals engaging in a spot of volleyball. In order to keep the gameplay nice and exciting though, Next Level Games decided to include wrestling-style maneuvers as part of the characters' movesets. This did not go down well with Nintendo, who took a strong disliking to the violence, claiming that the game violated Nintendo's code of honor. They deemed that what they saw was far too realistic to be considered suitable for their young fanbase, and as such, cancelled the game. Now don't get us wrong, we're all for Mario and chums maintaining their squeaky clean image, but unless the devs had ideas for Mortal Kombat style fatalities, we're struggling to see how Super Mario Spikers was any more violent than Super Smash Bros. We're also not sure why Nintendo didn't just ask Next Level Games to take the wrestling bits out. I suppose there are some mysteries we'll never solve. Number 6. Scalebound. Most of us have, at one point or another, been stung by hype culture. I know which game you think I'm going to reference here, but I'm not going to do it. We've covered it far too many times. Alright, fine, it's No Man's Sky. Are you all happy now? And you know what? Whilst I'm here, Cyberpunk 2077 as well. Letdowns. You're both letdowns. We've frequently talked about what a problem hype culture can be, and it's generally caused by video game companies over-promising and under-delivering. But in 2017, Microsoft went the wrong way about trying to tackle the issue. Scalebound was originally announced at E3 2014 and would have seen players taking on the role of Drew, a young man making his way into the world of Draconis accompanied by his dragon pal Thuban. The game was due to be released in 2016, but was later delayed by a year before being cancelled altogether in January 2017. The reason? Phil Spencer believed that Scalebound had been revealed far too early, and as such, fan expectations were too high for the game to reach. Rather than tempering those expectations, they just decided to scrap the whole thing instead. Genius. Number 5. Fable Legends. To say that the Fable series has had a bit of a turbulent past is probably an understatement. After all, Peter Molyneux has a bit of a reputation for getting overexcited about the games he's working on and making promises to fans that his games have ultimately not been able to deliver on. Remember him reassuring us that Fable the Journey wouldn't be on rails? And what was it? That's right, it was on rails. You big liar, Peter! However, following the release of Fable The Journey, Molyneux left Lionhead Studios, leaving the developer to plow ahead with its follow-up, somewhat Molyneux-less. Fable Legends was announced in 2013 and was planned to be a prequel to the Fable series. A closed online beta released in 2014, and it seemed, to fans at least, like everything was going smoothly down at Lionhead HQ. Sadly, this was not the case. With Molyneux gone, Lionhead was pressured to make Fable Legends free to play, something with which they had no experience. As time went on, the studio ended up spending more and more money trying to enhance the game's graphics and getting to grips with Unreal Engine 4, and it's alleged that the budget reached $75 million before Microsoft pulled the plug and shut down the studio. I mean, if you can't make a game for 75 big ones, you should probably have a word with yourself. Number 4. Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. If you're familiar with Steven Spielberg's iconic action hero Indiana Jones, you'll know that the whip-sporting, hat-loving hunk enjoys nothing more than taking on Nazis and handing their asses to them. Something you might not know is that due to some things the German government did between 1938 and 1945, any use of Nazi imagery is banned in the country. In 1992, LucasArts released the critically acclaimed Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, a point-and-click adventure which revolved around the eponymous protagonist's search for the lost city of Atlantis. The game was a huge success, so the company planned a sequel titled Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. It would have been set sometime after World War II and would have seen Indy trying to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone before the Nazis could use it to resurrect Hitler. Regrettably, the game never saw the light of day because LucasArts realized that they wouldn't have a hope in hell of releasing the game in Germany, and considering that the depiction of Nazis was so integral to the plot, there wasn't much chance of censoring the game either. According to LucasArts, if they were unable to sell the game in Germany, they wouldn't be able to recoup their losses, and so they opted to can the project entirely. Perhaps do your censorship research first next time, hey guys? Number 3. Daredevil. Now, let's be honest, when it comes to movie tie-in video games, we don't expect much, but the absolute bare minimum we do expect is that they actually get released. Many years before Charlie Cox took on the role of the blind lawyer turned vigilante, Ben Affleck squeezed his buns into that tight leather outfit. The film was, well, not good, but it did, at the very least, make it out of the gate. The tie-in video game, on the other hand, did not. Daredevil was set to be released across several platforms around the same time as the film, but for a number of reasons it never made it to launch. Indie studio 5000 Feet had a lot of ideas for the game, and had it gotten a release, it's likely that Daredevil would have found himself grinding around Hell's Kitchen and detecting enemies using sonar-like abilities. Several factors played into the game's cancellation, but perhaps the most shocking was the alleged drug problems that plagued the studio. It's reported that a number of illegal substances frequently made their way into the offices, and that several employees would often turn up to meetings whilst high. Unsurprisingly, the project was cancelled, and the studio hasn't developed a game since 2006. Number 2. Ant Simulator. We've all thought about what we would do if we suddenly came into a large sum of money. Most of us would buy a nice house, travel the world, and do more of the things that we love. That's all great, of course, as long as the money you're spending actually belongs to you. Admittedly, Ant Simulator wasn't going to be groundbreaking. With that said, though, there was plenty of interest in the project, and had it been released, it might have gotten the attention of the YouTube community, a la games like Goat Simulator. Alas, it was not meant to be. According to Eric Terenchinski, who was leading the project, the development of Ant Simulator collapsed because his business partners, Tyler Montz and Devon Staley, had taken thousands of dollars worth of Kickstarter and investment money and blown it on restaurants, bars, and strippers. Because the trio's company, Atiski, owned Ant Simulator, Terenchinski couldn't continue to work on it by himself, and as such, the project was canned. Montz and Staley vehemently deny Terenchinski's claims and allege that any money spent on T&E was reasonable and accounted for in the company's books. Can someone check with Adam what a reasonable amount is for the company to spend on strippers? Just for my own records. Number 1. Sonic x-treme. As we all know, crunch is one of the 4 horsemen of the video game apocalypse, alongside microtransactions, NFTs, and Peter Molyneux. And although some companies seem to be getting better at avoiding it, there are still a great deal that rely on the practice. Generally, crunch will mean that the developers are forced to work ridiculously long hours for weeks, if not months, on the bounce, and often without any sort of compensation. Though it gets games out of the door, it means that the poor developers putting in all of the work will go without sleep, miss out on seeing their families and friends, and in the case of 2 developers working on Sonic x-treme, almost die. In order to try and get the game out as per Sega of Japan's demands, one programmer, Chris Coffin, ended up moving into her office and working anywhere up to 20 hours per day. As a result of being overworked to such extremes, she contracted severe pneumonia. Designer Chris Sen also became sick due to the severe crunching he was doing, and after losing weight and falling ill with extreme exhaustion, his doctor told him that he could have as little as 6 months to live. I'm sure that we can all agree, no matter how excited for a game we are, it isn't worth the lives of the people who make them. Be good to your developers, people.